Well, good evening everyone, and welcome to another little video from We Belong Dead. And we're doing this whole series of videos to talk about different aspects of the 70s monster memories, to tie in with the digital release of our book, 70s Monster Memories, which will be available very, very soon for those of you who never managed to get one of the physical copies. Now, what we'll talk about today is model kits. And growing up in the 70s, we were a bit spoilt with model kits, it's very true. I remember Aurora did these wonderful prehistoric scenes. They were great. And they were kind of snap together ones, and you could build them all together into this huge diorama. And I only had a couple of those. I think I had the Allosaurus and Caveman and the tar pit, which had, I think it was a mastodon sinking into the tar pit, and there was a tree, a giant vulture sitting on the tree. But these were wonderful. These were really wonderful. And because they snapped together, you didn't need glue. Because the one thing I was always rubbish at was actually gluing the model kits together. I would get glue everywhere apart from actually on the model kit parts. So you had prehistoric scenes. You also had the Planet of the Apes. They were great. They were clipped together ones as well. I remember I had Dr. Zaius and Dr. Zira and General Ursus. That was my favourite from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and they were great kits to have as well. And another of my favourites, they had these giant monster ones based on kind of some of the giant bug films of the 1950s. So they had one with a giant wasp, I remember that, and a giant scorpion, I guess based on Willis O'Brien's Black Scorpion, and then one with a massive praying mantis, based on the deadly mantis, I guess, and then my favourite, the tarantula. And they were great because they had a diorama that went with them as well, with little cars and buildings and stuff, and they were fantastic. My only disappointment with those is they never did a giant ant one, because them had been the first giant bug movie I'd ever seen, and I really wish they'd done a giant ant one, but it wasn't meant to be. But the ones I'm going to talk about now, the ones that hold most affection, I think, for people, are the Aurora glow-in-the-dark monster models. Now, Aurora in the States in the 60s had released these monster kits, and they were in these long boxes. We never saw the long boxes in the UK, as far as I'm aware anyway. We only had the square boxes, which were reissued later in the 70s, which were the glow-in-the-dark ones. And there was a whole series of them. You had the Frankenstein monster. Oh, and by the way, these boxes were as good as anything because they had amazing artwork by James Barmer on the front of the boxes. And when you got the instructions inside, what was cool was the front of the instructions was the black and white version of the painting, plus a little story, and was telling you about the creature that you were going to assemble. And at that time, I hadn't really seen any of these monsters on TV. So my imagination ran wild with some of these ones. So there was a Frankenstein monster based on the Glenn Strange version of the creature. You had Dr. Jekyll as Mr. Hyde, which is kind of loosely based on the Frederick March Paramount version. The Mummy was the Lon Chaney Jr. version, the 3 films he did for Universal. Dracula was the Lugosi Dracula, of course. The Hunchback was an interesting one because they had to change the original artwork because it bore too much of a similarity to Anthony Quinn in the 1950s version of the Hunchback. So for copyright reasons, they had to change that. The Phantom of the Opera, another interesting one because the painting on the front and the actual model itself. We'll talk about that in a wee while, but that was it wasn't the Chaney version, it wasn't the Rains version. It was more James Cagney playing Lon Chaney, playing the Phantom of the Opera in the movie Man of a Thousand Faces. Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Wolfman. Wolfman, actually, you can have a look here. Here is the Wolfman. I hasten to add, I didn't do the paint work. You thought I was bad at gluing the things together, painting was a mess. I tried to do the Frankenstein monster ones, complete and utter shambles. And this one I got off eBay recently, and whoever did it did a fantastic job paint job on this one. So this is kind of based on the Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman, although obviously in the movies he's not bare chested. He's wearing a shirt. So let's put him over there. What else did we have? We had The Forgotten Prison of Castlemare, which wasn't a movie monster at all. Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine had done a competition to discover a new monster for the Aurora company to make into a model kit. The Forgotten Prison was always interesting though, because what was the backstory to that, you know? And you could make up your own story. Who was this forgotten prisoner? Why was he forgotten? Why was he a prisoner? And then later on, they added The Bride of Frankenstein, but not in the UK. We never got The Bride of Frankenstein. And then they had three bigger kits, and these were The Witch of Salem, nothing to do with the movie at all, and King Kong and Godzilla. So that was the entire collection of the Aurora monsters. Now, the first one I ever bought was our friend here, the Phantom of the Opera. And look at that artwork by James Barmer, and it just brings back so many memories, glow in the dark. And this is the first one I ever bought. I used to go once a month to a local model shop, and you know, I would save up my pocket money. I would buy a Flying Fortress bomber plane, or I would buy a model of the German battleship, the Bismarck, or whatever. Well, one day I went there, and in the window, among the tanks and the aircraft carriers and everything else, stood this box, crying out, buy me, buy me. And I had to have it, so I saved up my money, and I went and got this. And you know, the dilemma with these things always was, because they came with the glow-in-the-dark parts, which were great, and he's the Phantom himself. It's not all there. His mask is missing, and the prisoner is missing here. Again, not my paintwork. But the dilemma was, you would get like the head and the hands and rats or whatever would be in glow-in-the-dark version, and also just the ordinary plastic. So do you use the ordinary version, or do you do the glow-in-the-dark version? And then do you paint them? Do you? I had them all on my dressing table, and they used to all glow. You know, I switched the light out, and it was like, wow, they're all glowing in the dark. This is great. But this is the Phantom of the Opera. And yes, so I bought this, and at the time I hadn't seen the movie, and about 3 weeks after I made this kit, the BBC One showed the Phantom of the Opera. It was the Claude Rains version from the 1940s, which was probably more opera than Phantom, to be honest. I remember that night, it was a Friday night, because BBC One had Phantom of the Opera, and Tyne Tees Television, my local station, had Dr. Blood's Coffin. So I was kind of switching between the two so as not to miss anything. And I came back to the Phantom of the Opera right at the climax, when the catacombs all fall in, Claude Rains' Phantom is killed, and then in the rubble you just see his mask and his violin. And I was 11 years old, you know, and I thought, oh no, but it's the Phantom of the Opera. So the Phantom is a ghost, obviously. So this is where the story is really going to get going now, because the man has died, and now his ghost is going to come back to haunt everyone. And I thought it was kind of, the story was going to go on. So I was immensely disappointed as an 11-year-old that was the end of the film. Like, I mean, I've since seen most versions of Phantom of the Opera, and the Lon Chaney version is by far the superior version, the one that still remains one of my favourite movies. Another kit that I got, which I absolutely loved, was this one, The Creature. And again, look at the wonderful painting there, the James Barmer artwork. And obviously based on the Universal's Creature from the Black Lagoon films. But at the time, I hadn't seen any of the three films. So, you know, again, it was getting the assembly instructions, and they had a little story about the creature, and it fascinated me. I thought, what is this all about? I really want to see this movie. But anyway, so I bought this one in the little seaside town of Whitby in North Yorkshire. I grew up in the northeast of England, in County Durham, so we would go to Whitby quite a lot on holidays. And even now, it's my favourite place in the world, and I try to get there at least once a year. And of course, the fascination with Whitby, apart from anything else, is Bram Stoker stayed there on a number of occasions, and he based about a third of the novel Dracula in Whitby. So when Dracula first arrives in England aboard the ship the Demeter, he comes ashore at Whitby. He jumps ashore as a wolf at Tate Hill Pier and runs up the 199 steps to the ruins of Whitby Abbey. Anyway, I was about 12 and we were on a school trip. The school had hired a train and we took the train to Whitby. My mum had given me some money to buy some sticks of rock, some hard candy for our friends and neighbours, and then she also gave me 50p pocket money to spend on myself. So we get to Whitby and we're walking through the main street on the way to the steps up to the Abbey, and I spy a model shop which was actually there up until just a few years ago, and in the window of the model shop we have the creature. But it's 99p and I only have 50p. But then I think, oh, hold on a sec, I have this other money here as well, don't I? So I spent 99p. I didn't get any sticks of rock, and I was very, very happy until I got home, and then my mum was not best pleased with me, to say the least. But still one of my favourites. I haven't managed to track down a completed creature kit yet, but I'm working on that. And the two that you could never find actually were Godzilla and King Kong. For some reason, the northeast of England, they were nowhere to be found. And then one day, I was staying for the weekend in my grandparents' caravan in the seaside town of Redcar. And I was out with my mum, and we're on the seafront, and we popped into Woolworths. And lo and behold, I couldn't believe my young eyes. What did I find in the model section there? They had King Kong. Now this is the one I always really, really, really wanted, and I couldn't believe my luck. There was the box, again with the great James Balmer artwork and the glowing head, and I have to have this, I have to have this. Because this one, along with the Witch and Godzilla, were bigger boxes, they were slightly more expensive. They were £1.25 as opposed to 99p. But I took it to the counter, I paid my £1.25, and I remember I literally ran back to my grandparents' caravan, so excited. Imagine my disappointment when I opened the box to find somebody had glued most of it together. They glued the body together, they glued the base. To this day, I don't know how that even happened. Like, who does that? Who goes into a store with a tube of glue and glues a model together and puts it back in the box? But suffice to say, I was immensely disappointed, really, really disappointed. So I went back to Woolworths, and they said, well, that was the only one we had, unfortunately. So I ended up getting the Witch of Salem instead, which was not as good, to be honest. And it took me many, many years, but finally I managed to get the King. And again, look at the wonderful paint job on that. Nothing to do with me, obviously, but I finally got King Kong. Very, very happy, and this has pride of place in my apartment. So yeah, growing up, these were just wonderful. I mean, these days there's so many model kits, so many detailed model kits, quite expensive, I guess, but and I've got one or two of them. But here I just wanted to look at those ones from the 70s and the nostalgia involved in that. So do let us know what your favourite model kit was, and also what would be interesting to know, what monsters do you think Aurora should have, if they carried on going, what monsters should they have made a model kit of? And as I say, the Aurora model kits are among the many things covered in our 70s Monster Memories book. Very good article by Martin Cage, looking at the 13 monsters of Aurora. And I'll be back next time with a little video about monster movie books of the 70s. My friend and co-editor Daryl Buxton has already done one on the Lorimer books, so do check that one out as well. And we'll be back very soon. And as soon as we get the digital version up and running, and we'll be posting links and we'll be telling you how you can get hold of that. So for now, have a good evening, stay safe, and we'll see you very soon.